Hello, and welcome to the third in our series of Library and Information Skills. Here we have an image by Tove Jansson, creator of the Moomins, for the cover of Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. These illustrations were first published in 1966. Alice in Wonderland is a childhood classic, and you've probably encountered the story, if not through the book, then perhaps through a film adaptation. It's often described as an excellent piece of nonsense, which I think can detract from quite how subversive and full of meaning the story can be. Today, I'm taking some of the lessons we can learn from Wonderland and applying them to the wonderful land of learning, of education, and of research. I'm going to take you step by step through the process of doing research, which generally means writing an essay, but can relate to any time you need to systematically investigate something to reach new conclusions. For those of you doing a research project for school, Global Perspectives, Extended Project, this lesson is for you. Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. So for those uninitiated, Alice is a curious girl. She's sitting on the riverbank when a rabbit rushes past. Intrigued by the rabbit, she follows him down a rabbit hole. At the bottom of this rabbit hole, she finds a long hall filled with a great many locked doors. And in the long hall is a table on which she finds a tiny little key for a tiny little door that leads to a beautiful garden. And Alice wishes that she could shut up like a telescope so she could fit through the door. When she returns to the table, she finds a bottle on it marked "Drink Me." Now, Alice doesn't drink from that bottle until she's fully inspected it. As Lewis Carroll tells us, Alice is wise. And here is our first lesson. When you're presented with a research question, don't just leap in and respond to it straight away. You need to inspect it, evaluate it. First, you'll want to identify the instruction words. Analyse, assess, argue, evaluate, explore, review, summarise. All of these require you to do different things in answering your research question. Then you'll need to recognise the subject or general topic of the research and pinpoint the focus or constraint. Every research question has a focus. You can't write everything there is to know about a topic in one research project. The focus provides limits. It may set constraints such as focus on one aspect, or provide context such as focus on the topic in a specific situation or time frame, for example. Don't lose sight of these when undertaking your research. It can be easy to get distracted down the rabbit hole when researching, but if you're being graded on how well you answer a question, no matter how interesting your work may be, if it doesn't answer that question set, your teacher can't award you any marks. Chapter 2, The Pool of Tears. Once Alice is convinced the bottle isn't poison, she drinks it and finds herself shrinking until she's about 10 inches high. She can now fit through the little door into the lovely garden, but she left the key on the table and can't reach it. She finds a glass box under the table in which is some cake marked "Eat Me" with some currants. She takes a bite. Nothing happens at first, and so she eats the whole cake. Soon she is more than 9 feet high, and she cries herself into a pool of tears. Here is lesson number 2. Alice has a vision of a beautiful garden, and she has the tools to get there, but she doesn't plan ahead, and so she ends up in a bit of a muddle, a pool of tears. Once you have a clear research question, you want to explore it, take different perspectives, consider the big, broad, general topic, as well as the specificities and smaller focus area of your topic. You need to get a feel for the territory you're about to explore. A really great way to do this is by mind mapping. Keep in mind your purpose when you're mind mapping. You may be learning about a new topic, and so you're trying to hone in on a specific aspect to explore. Your mind map will be more of a free-form, messy brainstorm to allow you to find what interests you, what is often called a concept map. Or you may have a very defined question you want to answer, and so your mind map needs to represent a comprehensive overview of the topic to allow you to map out the details and the implications. Your mind map will be highly structured and more formal, more of the classic hierarchical mind map. The way you design your mind map will impact how you interact with it. In a chaotic, creative, personal kind of way to aid your thinking about the topic, or a systematic, highly presentable kind of way to communicate effectively to others. Chapter 3: A Caucus Race and a Long Tail. After the pool of tears threatens to drown Alice, she encounters a group of creatures led by the dodo. The dodo suggests they dry themselves off with a caucus race. There are no rules to the caucus race. Everyone runs in arbitrary directions, and the race is over not when a finish line is reached, but when the dodo decides it is over. In the story, it represents the arbitrary and unpredictable nature of human behaviour. This is often what research feels like. You throw a question into the abyss, maybe Google or generative AI, and you indiscriminately work with what is thrown back at you. Lesson number 3 is to question the seemingly arbitrary and to seek out more rational and critical techniques of information seeking. How can we do this? We can be very intentional about where we go looking for our information. We covered a little of this in our previous video, The Tortoise and the Hare, when we considered the pros and cons of different media. So consider your topic and what balance of specialist or reactive online information and more comprehensive or weighty book information you require. Then don't just rely on Google or generative AI to find your information. Start with your class notes, identify any key sources, so prominent authors, centres for research, specialist organisations who can provide credible, reliable information to begin building the foundations of your knowledge and research on the topic. Chapter 4: The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. Alice is quite disoriented by this point, as is also often the case when researching. The group of creatures have all left her, and the White Rabbit appears again. He's looking for his gloves and fan. Alice decides to help. Arriving at White Rabbit's house, she discovers them on a table, where she also spots a little bottle that is standing near a looking glass. There is no drink me label this time, but she decides that she's tired of being so small, and it's likely to be an interesting experience whatever happens. She does, in fact, grow. She has not learnt from her earlier experience to consider her surroundings and requirements, and ends up stuck inside White Rabbit's house. So here is lesson 4. Look back and look up. Learn from experience. Experience is valuable, not just your own. We learn a great deal from the experiences of others. We also learned in our first video in this series that Sir Isaac Newton, among others, liked to think of learning in this way. He said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." He was talking about learning from experts, leading thinkers, prominent authors, seminal texts. If you are choosing to gain a better view on a topic, it can be essential to rely on the works of those who've come before you, before going off and trying to learn the world anew yourself. But in today's information-rich world, you have many shoulders to choose from. How do you ensure that you are choosing the best shoulders upon which to see further from? How can you be sure that those giant shoulders are reliable, trustworthy, good pillars of learning, and not unreliable sources, fake news, or even algorithmic hallucinations? Well, we'll get into that next. Chapter 5: Advice from a Caterpillar. After Alice frees herself from the White Rabbit's house and gets distracted by a puppy, distraction is something that happens a lot when researching, she comes across a caterpillar sat on top of a large mushroom. The caterpillar asks who she is, and Alice explains that she isn't feeling herself on account of all the changes and the unexpected things she's experienced. The caterpillar gives Alice a very useful piece of advice about how to take charge of her own journey through Wonderland. Alice's meeting with the caterpillar underlines the importance of understanding one's own nature, of not being blinded by the appearance of authority, and of the importance of self-reliance and making choices that align with one's own needs and desires. Lesson 5 is all about the skill of critical thinking. Critical thinking is a tool we cultivate to help us skillfully assess something, to form reasoned judgments and solve problems. It requires us to question assumptions, consider different perspectives, and form well-supported conclusions. When researching a topic, we can critically analyse and question authority by looking at our sources and asking, like the caterpillar, who are you? Who is this author? What are their credentials? Why do they do this kind of research? Is anything missing from this interpretation of the topic? What biases or assumptions might they have? And also, what is my bias? And then beyond that, we can consider what groups of people typically study this aspect of my topic. Where does this piece of research fit within that framework? To create what we call a literature review. For more on this, see our YouTube lesson on writing a literature review. Chapter 6, Pig and Pepper. Alice comes upon the Duchess's house. After a perplexing conversation with the footman, Alice lets herself into the house. The cook is making a soup with too much pepper, making everyone sneeze violently. The Duchess is nursing a baby who turns into a pig. She sings a violent song about discipline and shakes and tosses him until he howls. The Cheshire Cat watches on, not disturbed by the pepper. Later, Alice meets the cat out at the edge of the wood. Alice is now growing in confidence and is able to act with purpose instead of merely being directed by the absurdities of her world. She is learning to embrace the absurdity of the world she's found herself inhabiting. When the Cheshire Cat proclaims, "We're all mad here," he's commenting on the unconventional nature of reality in Wonderland and of Alice's place within it. In the context of Wonderland, what can we say appears to be strange and nonsensical behaviour, and what is comfortably within the parameters of normalcy? Context is everything. Lesson number 6 is, when approaching a text or narrative, read with context and purpose. Let me explain. Here, context refers to the constituent parts of the text that surround the sentences you may read. Before reading a text for information, pre-read. By this I mean survey the text, read the introduction and conclusion before the main text, scan the contents page of longer texts, or headings for shorter texts. Note any keywords, glossary lists, bullet points, and summary boxes to get an approximate idea of what the author is going to tell you about before starting to read the text. That way, you'll have an idea of context when you're reading the details. Purpose refers to the purpose you have in reading the text. Be intentional. If you have a specific question in mind, don't take notes to summarize what the author is saying. Instead, take notes after each paragraph to summarize how what you've just read can help you answer your research question. The purpose the author had in writing their text may not be the same as the purpose you have in reading it. Keeping your purpose front and centre will help keep you on track and prevent you from becoming distracted or confused when trying to answer your research question. Chapter 7, A Mad Tea Party. The Cheshire Cat directs Alice to the March Hare's house, where she finds the March Hare and the Hatter having tea with a sleepy dormouse at a table under a tree in front of the house. After a run-in with the Hatter and the Queen, time has become unyielding, and it is now always 6 o'clock, and so always tea time. Since there is no time to clear away, the trio simply move along a seat at the table to a fresh place setting, in perpetual motion through space, while time remains immovable, an albeit inverted reference to Newton's theory of absolute time and space. The Dormouse tells the story of 3 sisters who draw treacle from a well, treacle being a play on the old term treacle, meaning medicinal balm or salve. The 3 sisters are presumed to be the 3 Liddell sisters, but could also refer to the 3 Greek fates who determine the course of human life from birth to death. The Dormouse talks about much of a muchness, and hereby expounds the theme of the chapter. And we have lesson number 7. Things really are dreary when they are much of a muchness. Alice in Wonderland celebrates curiosity, imagination, critical thinking, as well as diversity, uniqueness, nuance. It offers multiple, sometimes conflicting perspectives, which are all put forward as valid, and encourages maintaining an open mind while exploring new worlds full of new concepts. Carroll represents and simplifies complex concepts, not so much to prove one view of a thing right and another wrong, as to get both views clearly stated, he told his sister in a letter from 1894. Lesson number 7 is a recommendation to at least try to spot when there are important and relevant voices missing from our research question or topic. When you look at the books, articles, websites you have consulted to learn about your research topic, are they all from a certain kind of source? Are they all male, all white, all of a Western perspective, all of a colonial perspective? Are they all much of a muchness? If you're writing about Scottish history, isn't it important to include Scottish authors when reading about Scottish history? Don't we want a diversity of voices when writing about politics or history? Challenge internal bias and structural inequalities by ensuring your research is inclusive and reflects the global community. Your work will be more accurate, ethical, and impactful, and will promote social justice and positive change. Chapter 8: The Queen's Croquet Ground. Upon leaving the tea party, Alice notices that one of the trees has a little door in it. That door leads her to the beautiful garden she has been seeking since falling down the rabbit hole. The gardeners, who are playing cards, are hurriedly painting the roses of a white rose tree red and arguing amongst themselves. 5 is telling 2 about how 7 brought the cook tulip roots instead of onions. Tulip roots are poisonous but easily mistaken for edible onions. They're painting the roses red because it was meant to be a red rose tree. If the Queen finds out, she will order the gardeners' heads to be cut off. In this chapter, we see Alice growing in confidence and speaking her mind with the Queen. She's invited to play croquet, but the mallets are flamingos, the balls are hedgehogs who keep crawling away, and the hoops are soldiers who keep walking off to other parts of the ground. Lesson 8 is never present tulip roots as onions. Or rather, read the instructions and jump through the required hoops. The Queen's game of croquet is a chaotic spectacle, lacking in reason or fairness. It's a manifestation of the Queen's tyranny and unchecked power. When you're doing research, maybe an essay or project for school, there will be rules you must abide by. Hopefully, these will be rational, fair, and easy to follow. Maybe you have a word limit, a formatting requirement, a deadline for completion. Perhaps it requires a reference list, a literature review. Whatever it may be, ensure you have read the instructions carefully and understand what is required. What's more, reread your research question very carefully. Then make sure your written response actually answers the question set and that you haven't gone on a little side quest. As interesting as that may be, it will not earn you marks. If you can see the marking criteria, make sure you tick all of those boxes to gain the highest marks. Chapter 9: The Mock Turtle's Story. The Duchess is brought to the croquet ground. She's much more agreeable than when we first met her in Pig and Pepper, and is keen to share with Alice some morals, such as take care of the scents and the sounds will take care of themselves, and birds of a feather flock together, and brace yourselves. Never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise. Phew. And this is lesson number 9, if you follow. There is an exercise I recommend everyone does before handing in their work. In fact, if you're writing an essay, I would recommend you do this when your main argument is done, but before you write your introduction and conclusion. Take each paragraph of your main argument in turn. Condense each paragraph into a 1-sentence summary of what that paragraph says. Then line up those sentence summaries in order. Read them, preferably out loud. You may even like to ask a friend to read the sentence summaries and ask them what they thought of your argument. If they make sense and are a complete argument, your research is complete. Feel free to write your conclusion and introduction and hand in your work. This rarely happens first time though. You will likely find that there are steps missing from your argument, maybe duplication among the sentence summaries. Perhaps the sentences need reordering to run more smoothly. Fix your argument in summary sentence form and then amend the full text accordingly. In Lewis Carroll style, I believe an introduction should be the very last thing you write. This may seem illogical, but your introduction informs your reader what they're about to read. You won't know what they're about to read until you've written it. So you can't possibly know what your introduction should contain until the very end of the writing process. Chapter 10. The Lobster Quadrille. The Lobster Quadrille is a rather violent dance in which you throw your lobster partners as far out to sea as you can. The Mock Turtle sings a rather ominous song to accompany it, a verse of which is shown here in grey. Then the Mock Turtle makes some dad jokes about fish, eels and porpoises, and sings another song about turtle soup. And so to lesson 10. Fling out those unnecessary passages. As the Mock Turtle would say, there's no use getting too attached if they don't serve your purpose. Sorry, but it had to be done. What matters it how much we cut? His scaly friend replied. There is another reader, see, upon the other side. The further from the marking chip, the nearer it is to fail. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Remember, you will likely have an audience, a reader or marker. That reader will be very glad if your argument is clear, uncluttered by extraneous bits of information you found interesting or spent time on and just can't bear to waste. As cruel as it may feel, your marker will reward you if you are strict with yourself and keep to answering your research question. Use those summary sentences to identify what is needed to make your argument and what is not. Chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? Alice arrives at the court to see the king and queen seated on their thrones with a jury of 12 creatures. The White Rabbit announces that the Knave of Hearts is to be tried for stealing the queen's tarts. Lesson number 11 is to never pass off research as your own. I'm talking about something we typically call referencing. We've spoken about the value of standing on the shoulders of giants, learning from the experts who have come before us, but it is just as important to give credit to those experts when we use their work. There are 2 reasons why we do this. Firstly, to acknowledge that it is their research and not something we came up with. We give what's called a reference to the research the information came from. Secondly, it allows us to use the references of others to track back and see how others have come to their conclusions, or to repeat their work to test out if we could come to the same conclusions. For more on this, you can watch our YouTube video on referencing and plagiarism. But for now, all you need to know is that even if you reword the information you have read or heard somewhere, you must give a short reference. That short reference must refer the reader to a more detailed reference in your bibliography at the end of your work, which lists all the things you've used when researching your topic. The reference could simply be Carroll, page 94, and the detailed one could look like this: author's name, title of the research, publication details, page reference or web address. Here are 2 examples. The italics, commas, full stops, parentheses, and the overall order are important. But it's worth noting that there are lots of different styles of reference. If in doubt, your teacher will provide details on their preferred style. Chapter 12. Alice's Evidence. Our final chapter. Alice is called to give evidence. White Rabbit presents an anonymous poem. In the end, Alice outwits the king and defies the queen. Following the Duchess's earlier advice to be what you seem to be, she names the guards as nothing but a pack of cards, and they fly up at her. Alice wakes up from Wonderland and finds herself back on the riverbank with her sister, who she shares her strange dream with. The story ends with Alice's sister imagining the simple joy and happiness of others with whom Alice might share this fantastical tale, highlighting the value of wonder and the importance of sharing that wonder with others. Curiosity, imagination, and critical thinking has led Alice on a journey of transformation. She's grown in confidence and in competence through her experiences. Our final lesson relates to this journey of self-discovery, to the willingness to adapt to different perspectives, and of having the strength to progress even when you don't understand everything. These are the qualities required to undertake meaningful research and to learn and grow. Here's the important final message. In a world of generative AI like ChatGPT, Copilot, Perplexity, Claude, and search engines like Google and Bing, it can be easy to rely on these systems to support your studies. But there are significant trade-offs with using these for academic purposes. A recent MIT study confirmed what many of us have suspected for a long time. The more you rely on these tools to support your academic study, the lazier, more stupid, and less able your brain becomes. It turns out that outsourcing the process of research also outsources the final product. If you rely on AI to support your research, you won't learn from your research. Your AI will. You might get a good result, but it's merely a facade. You won't have developed in confidence and competence. You won't have built a stronger, more agile brain. So the next task and the next task and the next task will seem just as confusing as the first, while your peers who haven't relied on AI so heavily will be finding each new task easier and easier to complete. Short-term gain leads to long-term brain drain. Just like working a muscle in the gym, you have to work hard, put in the effort, cope with the frustrating, slow progress of getting stronger. Then, in time and with effort, you will be able to lift heavier and heavier weights. Don't be misled by our output-focused education system. The essay or other piece of written work isn't the meaningful end point. It's the means to an end, which is building your skills. It's merely a demonstration of what you can produce. The essay isn't the real evidence of growth, skill, and confidence. You are.